Hello, everybody. My name is Neil Callaghan, and I live in Eastbourne, East Sussex, in the United Kingdom. Last Monday, the 8th of June, I was privileged to hear a homily given by Monsignor John Armitage, the rector of the Basilica and Catholic National Shrine of Our Lady at Walsingham. I found his homily to be profound and very relevant to what is happening in our world today, and therefore I would like to share it with you. The Gospel reading last Monday was about the Beatitudes. Beatitude is a word that comes from the Latin beate, meaning blessed or happy. And this takes place at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, and this is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. So, Jesus is saying that if you would understand what I am doing, these are the ways that you must follow. Jesus praises those who live in a certain way. And this is the way of the gospel, the way that will bring peace and healing and reconciliation in a divided world. Now, you could say that the world has been in a stop the clock moment over recent months. But when the frenzy of everyday survival radically changes, then the things that we do in our everyday life and we don't think of anything else, suddenly that changes. And we become aware of things that we usually put aside and ignore. One of the consequences of our present situation is that the fault lines within society will become very clear. Recent protests bring to our attention the problems of racism and inequality in our midst. But protests won't solve the problem. Problems that are endemic in society have to be identified. Truth must be spoken. Public concern and indeed sometimes anger must be expressed, but in peaceful ways. But what principally needs to change? Very often, when people want things to change, they're talking about other people. It's them who must change. It's the system that must change. Now let's have a look at the issue of pollution. Years of major conferences, protests, scientific research, government targets, and all sorts of prevarication. There was some change, but at a snail's pace, and a general sense that we would never meet the targets to bring down pollution. Then, in a matter of weeks, pollution falls by unprecedented levels across the world, in some places up to 50%. No target set by any conference would ever have been as ambitious as that. So what's happened? What made that change come about? We changed our behavior. We changed the way we do things. Whatever the issues the world is faced with, pollution, racism, inequality, injustice, famine, violence, warfare, oppression, we have to change our behavior if we are serious about changing the world. And that's the tough call. That's the hard bit. We look and say, change the structures, change the politics, change the policies, change this, change that. Fine. None of it works unless we are prepared freely to change ourselves. You see, the lockdown was not a free expression on the part of the people. We had to do it. We had no choice. And because we had no choice, we all did it. And pollution falls incredibly. But we don't live like that because we have to make our choices. So if we want things to change, we don't really need another lockdown, but we do need to recognize that we have to be different people working by a different set of values. The answer cannot be in lockdown. This is a temporary solution. This just keeps us apart, and it creates fear and weakens the human race, which can only flourish when we work together, when we work for a common good. We were too selfish in so many ways to address the issues on the environment and the other issues that have so dehumanized our world, because it would have meant a radical change to our lifestyle. Now, because of the pandemic, we have no choice. We have to change. Notice, we have to change and build a common good for all. But who is part of the we? When we talk about they have to do this, I am part of the they. When we talk about we've got to do this, I am part of it. We are together. And this can only change when we build a culture that respects all of life, from the cradle to the grave, with no exceptions. With no exceptions. With no exceptions that say, well, this person is inconvenient in my life, or if I do this, I will be a lesser person. No, there are no exceptions in the respect for life, regardless of ethnicity, race, class, or ability. We are in this together, and we have to rebuild our world together. That's why we need to listen and to take heart the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. The blessed points that will make us happy because we build a better world. The 8 Beatitudes can give us into a more love-filled life. The first 4 deal with our relationship with God, and the last 4 deal with our relationships with other people. Happy are the poor in spirit because they depend. They recognize their need of God instead of material security. Happy those who mourn. This is when we realize that we have fallen short of God's glory. Yes, we mourn for those who have died, but we also mourn, we grieve for the moments when we have fallen short, instead of relying on God's ways rather than the ways of the world. But he comforts us and supports us in our efforts to detach from the world and become more like him. Happy are those who are meek. When we submit to God's will, this fills us with a passion to do right and gives us compassion to serve those in need. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, when we desire to live truthfully and fight to end injustice and hunger. Happy the merciful, for we will gain the spiritual maturity to be merciful to others, because God has been merciful to us, which results in the blessing of receiving even more the mercy of God. Happy the pure in heart, for when we desire to open our hearts as we mourn the damage our sins have done that hurts others, this leads us to a greater holiness. And then we see God working through us to help others. Happy the peacemakers who submit themselves to do God's will and handle conflicts in the way of Jesus. For peace is founded on love, justice, and truth. When one of these human values is violated, peace is not attained. And finally, happy are those who are persecuted in the cause of right. What will happen if you keep these Beatitudes? What will happen is that you will be persecuted. You will be mocked. When you stand up and say, that's not right, or if you live your life in such a way that people can see the blessedness in your life, they will doubt your motives. They will call you a holy Joe. They will say you don't know what you're talking about. When people in politics sometimes look at the church and say, leave the church, let the church just do things behind closed doors. That's what the church does. That's been part of the problem, I believe, at the moment, where the sense of people coming to church, and thank God that has been partially lifted. But why was that not recognized as an essential part of the spiritual resilience in people's lives? It's almost the church came after the non-essential shops. But the church is essential. And when you live as though it is essential, you will challenge people. You will challenge people because you will live the truth. In your frailty and in your difficulties and in your struggles, yes. And you will protest, but it will be a protest of the heart. It won't be angry. It'll be firm. It'll be full of compassion. You see, unless you have compassion in your heart, you can't protest. You just get angry. But if you have a truly compassionate heart, meaning sharing the suffering of somebody else, sharing someone's passion, sharing someone's hurt, and if you have that in your heart, then your protest won't have to go out onto the streets, because you will be protesting by the way you live your life, because you will have compassion. And believe me, compassion is the greatest protest any human being can have. It is the way you change the world. It is the heart of yourself, sharing in the hurt, in the inequality, in the famine, in the injustice, in the prejudice of your brother and your sister. If you enter into that, if you are prepared to cross the road and be with your brother and sister, you change the world. You might only change it for one person, that doesn't matter. That's how you change the world for one person. To do small things with great love. So, may our world change. May these dreadful things that happen in our world be brought to light. May people see them. Let's not sweep them under the carpet. Let's see these things that are happening and have happened in the past. Let us face them with humility, because each one of us in our own way has something that has contributed towards these failures of our society. When the woman taken in sin is brought to Jesus, they say to him, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. Jesus looks at them, not at the woman, and says, let he who has not sinned, let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. Humility recognizes our faults, and it recognizes that if we will be honest with them, if we listen to the words of the Sermon on the Mount, we will change. And as we change, we will change our world. So yes, let's protest, but let us protest with compassion. Let us protest with purity of heart. Let us protest and be merciful. Let us protest and be peacemakers. Let us protest and hunger and thirst for righteousness. Let us be meek as we protest. And as we protest the protest of God, we will be persecuted because our protest, our compassion will be in the cause of right. And when we are like Christ, because we live as he lives, people will persecute us. And so today, let us protest the protest of God. For happy are the peacemakers, for they shall become like God. Amen. Thank you for watching.